who seems completely independent, like they don't need anyone. Maybe that's even you. You tell yourself, I'm fine on my own. Relationships are just too much. But what if I told you that this isn't true independence, but a trauma response? You push people away not because you don't care, but because deep down you were never thought it was safe to need anyone. You've learned to rely only on yourself, but part of you is tired of being so alone. If closeness makes you feel trapped, if love feels like a responsibility instead of something safe, you are not broken. You are protecting yourself the only way you know how. Avoidant attachment doesn't mean freedom, it often means loneliness disguised as independence. Why do avoidantly attached people push love away only to end up feeling empty? Why does I don't need anyone eventually turn into why does no one stay? In this series, we are diving into avoidant attachment and the lonely life, unpacking the hidden fears, emotional walls, and subconscious patterns that keep avoidance stuck in isolation. If you've ever wondered why deep connections feel so hard, or why you crave love but reject it at the same time, this series is for you. Let's break it down. Avoidants struggle to connect with their emotions because for much of their lives, they have learned to suppress and push them down. When emotions, especially negative ones, are not processed or released for an extended period, the subconscious mind becomes conditioned to holding onto these unprocessed memories at a cellular level. Over time, this leads to severe emotional disconnection. It's like an emotional blockage. Until the clog is removed, even the most fluid substance like water cannot flow freely. This is what happens to an avoidantly attached person. Their inability to process emotions over time creates a disconnect, making it difficult for them to feel emotions as deeply or naturally as others do. Dismissive avoidants struggle with emotional connection, not because they don't care, but because their nervous system has learned that closeness is unsafe. Somewhere in their past, emotional needs weren't met, so they adapted by shutting down those needs down entirely. So let's look at some of the factors that contribute to the development of this attachment style. Avoidant attachment can definitely be influenced by overbearing or authoritarian parenting, and this attachment often stems from early childhood experiences where emotional needs were either neglected or dismissed. But it can also result from an environment, while seemingly structured or nurturing, involved overbearing control or excessive demands for independence at a very young age. Now, let's look at how overbearing authoritarian parents contribute to avoidant attachment. A common denominator for both insecure attachment style is emotional neglect. Emotional neglect isn't about what happened, it's about what didn't happen. Lack of validation, warmth, or support leads to internalized shame and disconnection. Number one, emotional neglect. If parents are emotionally distant or critical, children may learn that their emotional needs are inconvenient or unwelcome. They may come to believe that their needs for love, affection, and care are a burden or that they cannot rely on others for comfort or validation. Number two is excessive independence. Now, authoritarian parents often place high value on self sufficiency and obedience. They may insist that children manage their emotions on their own or suppress their vulnerability in favor of independence and strength. Now, this can lead children to develop a sense that they must handle everything alone, rejecting help or emotional closeness as signs of weakness. Now, when these children become adults, most develop hyper-independence and struggle to rely on others or ask for help. A good example of this can be seen in children who were sent to boarding schools at a very young age before they were emotionally equipped to care for themselves. These children were often reinforced with the idea of independence and the expectation to look after themselves even when they weren't developmentally ready. Most of these children will naturally develop abandonment wound for being kept away from their parents and family at a young age. The third one is fear of rejection. Because the parents so often don't tolerate emotional expression or may even punish displays of dependence, children with avoidant attachment learn that showing need for vulnerability leads to rejection. Sometimes that rejection shows up as punishment for not complying with the parents' expectations. As a result, the children suppress their emotions and avoid intimacy to protect themselves from the pain of anticipated rejection. A good example of this is King Charles. If you watch The Crown on Netflix, you'll recognize how his early experiences were shaped by emotional neglect despite growing up with material comforts. His mother, Queen Elizabeth, unexpectedly became queen at just 25 after the death of her father, King George, leaving young Charles with limited emotional attention. Later, during adolescence, he was sent to boarding school against his will, a decision made by his authoritative father, Prince Philip, which Charles deeply resented. Now, this is a classic case of a child raised in a privileged environment but with emotionally unavailable caregivers, a mother preoccupied by duty, and a father with a strict authoritarian style. And the fourth one is a lack of emotional validation. Authoritarian parents often don't offer the warmth or validation children need to feel safe in expressing themselves. Children in this environment might internalize that their feelings are not important or worth acknowledging, which leads them to emotionally detach as a coping mechanism. And emotional validation often shows up in small gestures like acknowledging a child's drawing, schoolwork, or achievements, and encouraging them to keep trying even when they don't do well, or co-regulating emotions with them when they are sad or upset. Now, back to King Charles again. Unfortunately, when it came to his romantic life, he had little say and was expected to abide by the rules of the establishment he was born into. Despite finally experiencing the warmth and affection he lacked from his busy parents, he was pressured into marrying Princess Diana, who herself was deprived of love and emotional nurturing from her own mother. Now, this brought together two unhealed, deeply wounded individuals unable to meet each other's emotional needs, and their relationship eventually spiraled, ending in one of the most talked about and tragic royal marriage in modern history. But if we look at it now, we can clearly see why they were incompatible. So, as you understand, these early experiences stunt a children's healthy emotional development, leaving them without the tools to clearly communicate or express themselves. As a result, they often struggle to articulate their needs in relationships. One of the biggest challenges with insecure attachment styles, especially avoidant, is the inability to express emotions in a way that allows others to truly understand them. That's because in their early years, any attempt to express vulnerability was often met with dismissal, disapproval, or neglect. For avoidant individuals, the coping mechanism becomes emotional shutdown. When things get overwhelming, they go silent, not because they don't care, but because conflict or emotional intensity triggers their deepest wound, the fear that their needs will once again go unmet. And some of the common patterns that manifest in their relationships looks like the ice wall and emotional distancing. Avoidant individuals will often create this emotional distance as a form of self protection. They might nitpick or find faults in their partner, not because they don't care, but because intimacy feels threatening. Initially, they may show genuine interest, but as emotional closeness begins to build, they start to nitpick over the smallest things, how their partner dresses, how they wear their makeup, or even the way they eat. Now, these seemingly trivial criticisms are often a subconscious attempt to create distance and maintain emotional space. The next one is a very popular one, the fantasy partner trap. Many avoidant partners hold onto the idea of a perfect partner, a partner who just gets them without ever needing to get too close. It's a comforting fantasy where all their needs are met without having to reveal their inner world. But often, this ideal is one sided. They are focused on what they want without considering what they need to offer in return. Now, here's one common pattern with most dismissive avoidant partner is the phantom ex phenomenon. Is the one that got away. They idealize this past partner even if the relationship was dysfunctional or painful. You'll often notice they still mention an ex from years ago, yet rarely take accountability for what went wrong. The blame tends to fall solely on the ex, while their own emotional unavailability goes unexamined. When they meet someone new, the comparison with the phantom ex begins. No one quite measures up to the fantasy they've built in their mind, and this habit of romanticizing the past while emotionally distancing in the present keeps them stuck in a cycle of disconnection and dissatisfaction. And then we have the silent shame. Their early experiences often create deep emotional wounds, feelings of unworthiness, self loathing, and intense shame. Beneath the cool, detached exterior lies a core belief that their true emotions are a burden or that they themselves are too much or not enough. So, to protect themselves from the pain of rejection, they learn to shut down and disconnect emotionally. Keeping others at arm's length becomes a defense mechanism because, in their experience, emotional closeness often leads to rejection, disappointment, or abandonment. Another common trait that we see with a lot of avoidance generally need a lot of space to cope and self-soothe. But the issue lies in their inability or unwillingness to communicate this need to their partner. They often hold the unrealistic expectation that others should simply understand their need for space without them having to express it. And from the avoidance perspective, needing space isn't a red flag, it's a means of survival because emotional closeness wasn't modeled or felt safe in early life, they struggle to see emotional connection as either necessary or secure. Unfortunately, these behaviors can be deeply damaging to relationships as they often perpetuate cycles of abandonment, emotional neglect, and confusion for their partner. A lot of dismissive avoidance or people with avoidant attachment struggle with a lack of emotional awareness. Avoiders often don't realize they are pushing people away. They may genuinely believe they are being rational or practical. They tend to operate from logic rather than emotion as they are deeply disconnected from their own emotional world. Now, this disconnection means they often lack the capacity to feel or process emotions as deeply as others do. Now, their difficulty in tuning into both their own and others' emotional experiences makes it hard for them to recognize how emotionally unavailable they've become. Unfortunately, this can severely impact their ability to maintain healthy relationships. Being with someone who shuts down, distances themselves, gives the silent treatment, or avoids conflict altogether can be incredibly harmful for their partner, leaving them feeling abandoned, unseen, and emotionally starved. Now, the good news is healing attachment wounds and healing avoidant attachment is absolutely possible because I want you to understand that avoidant attachment isn't a flaw. It's a nervous system response that once served to protect you. It's the body's way of saying connection doesn't feel safe. But with the neurosomatic cellular release method, we don't force emotional closeness. We gently guide your system back to safety and connection at a pace that honors your own unique journey. So, step one to kickstart your healing journey is to have self awareness and nervous system mapping. So, we begin by building conscious awareness of your patterns like withdrawing, shutting down, or creating distance when things get emotionally close. These aren't bad behaviors, they are trauma informed responses. Now, understanding them is the first step in shifting them. Step two is creating inner emotional safety. Avoidant attachment forms when emotional expression was met with punishment, neglect, or pressure. Now, through breathwork, somatic practices, and subconscious reprogramming, we begin restoring safety in the body so you no longer have to run from emotional intimacy. Step 3. Now, this is really important. Reparenting the inner child. At the root of avoidant attachment are abandoned emotional needs, nurture, acceptance, and presence. So, through guided emotional processing, we help you reparent the younger parts of you that were told to toughen up or to deal with it alone. We meet those parts with love instead of shame. Step 4 is to restore safety in relationships. As the nervous system heals, relationship begins to feel less threatening. You'll notice a shift from needing extreme independence to being able to receive love, ask for support, and hold space for emotional connection without it feeling like a loss of self. Avoidant attachment doesn't make you broken, it makes you someone who adapted, and healing is possible gently, intentionally, and somatically. This is the heart of the neurosomatic cellular release method. We don't just talk about healing, we process it through the body, the nervous system, and the inner child so you can finally feel safe to love and be loved. If you're ready to begin your healing journey, let's connect, and I'll be glad to guide you through. Thank you so much, and I'll see you again in my next video.